Let's learn how we can move around our After Effects project using the tools that are available to us. So I came into After Effects. Let's just create a regular composition. And I'm going to change this to fit. So let's go over the tools real quick and notice how each of them are categorized. So there's like a line in between some of them. We're going to see what these tools are for. So first we have the home button, and if you click this, you're going to be redirected to After Effects Home. And if you're on the newest version, you may get this. If you want to learn more about the design space, you can hit Learn More, or learn more about the other things that are available for this version of After Effects. I'm going to close this off. So that was the home button, and you can also open project with that. And then next we have the selection tool. And as you saw, the shortcut is V. The selection tool is really basically the main tool for clicking on different workspaces, moving layers around, adding effects to those layers, and just anything else that is related to layers. So let me just bring in some layers. I'll just bring this guy in. Do that. Double click. Right, so as you saw, I used my selection tool to double click this composition to open the layers. This is available in the resource pack. You can use it. Using the selection tool, I can move around my layers. That's if they're not locked. If the lock is turned on, I cannot move them. You can see I cannot move the ghost. So for any unlocked layer and any visible layer, so the eyeball needs to be turned on, I can use a selection tool to move around my layers. Let's undo that. And also I can use the selection tool to add in certain transformations. So if I hit P on my keyboard, we're going to learn more about these later. I can use my selection tool to make keyframes for my layers. So the selection tool is the main tool that you will be using. Again, the shortcut is V. If you hit V on your keyboard, you're going to be directed to the selection tool. And to zoom in into the project, you can either go here. Right now it's on 25%. You can hit fit so it fits to your screen. Zoom in quite a lot, or just choose any number that you want. I'm also zooming in and out using the scroll wheel on my mouse. So this is the easiest way to zoom in and out. And let's say I wanted to zoom in on that potion pot, I believe you can call it. So I can't really move it around and get to my potion pot. Now, one way that you can move towards your a certain layer to zoom in and get the next tool, which is the hand tool. This hand icon. The hand tool is H on your keyboard. So using the hand tool, I can move around my videos. You can see I'm not actually moving the layer, but I'm moving the screen in general. Zoom out, you can see I'm still moving the screen and not the layers. So you're basically moving the entire window by itself, and you can't really do anything with the layers anymore. You can see I'm clicking, nothing is happening. Let me add something else, but you can use the hand tool to move around, like sliding through here. And I forgot to mention, with the selection tool, you can move around these little tabs. So right now you saw I went in window and I brought in my align tab. If I don't want this guy to be here, I'll just drag the name and I'll bring it maybe here. And I can use the selection tool to do this. I cannot use the hand tool to move different panels around. You can see nothing is happening. I am only selecting the workspaces. So the hand tool is to move around your video. If I zoom in and I want to get to a specific part, I will use the hand tool. And again, that's H on your keyboard. Then we have the zoom tool, which is Z on your keyboard. Again, you can just zoom in using the scroll wheel on your mouse, but you could also click on certain spots. Like if I want to zoom into the house, I will get my zoom tool or hit Z on my keyboard and then click on the house until I am zoomed in to where I want. Now the difference between the zoom tool and the scroll wheel is that with the zoom tool, wherever you click, you're going to be going towards that direction. So if I hit the ghost's eye, you can see I'm going towards the eye. But if I'm on the move tool, the selection tool, and I use the scroll wheel, if I want to go, let's say, towards the pumpkin, I can't really choose a direction, and in the end, I need to get my hand tool to move down towards my pumpkin. So that's the difference between the zoom tool and just your regular scroll wheel. I'm going to hit Edge to bring down my screen, or just change it to fit here. So that's the zoom tool, and notice how there isn't a tiny triangle next to these icons, but there is on these guys. You can see there is no tiny triangle here. When there is a tiny triangle, that indicates that there's going to be more options for that particular tool. So we only have one selection tool and no other options for it. Now the next three tools, they're grayed out because we cannot use them. These three tools are related to 3D layers. We will talk more about 3D layers in another lesson, but to just quickly show you, I'm going to make layer 4 a 3D layer. So you can see the Rubik's Cube up here. Just turn that on. And you can see now I can use these layers, but only on layer 4. If I go to the next layers, I cannot really use these. So I'm going to go on layer 4. You can see that there's this gizmo on this layer 4, but the rest of them don't have anything because they're not 3D layers. So on layer 4, we will talk more about this, but basically with a basic knowledge of geometry, you know that 3D shapes have 3 axes. So it's instead of X and Y, we have X, Y, and Z. So that's exactly what's happening here. Let me get my selection tool. We have, if you look at my cursor, we have Z, we have X, and we have Y. So you will be moving this shape according to these 3 lines, X, Y, and Z. We will learn more about these later. I'm going to turn all of these layers into 3D. Now the 3 tools that we have, let's quickly go over them. They're related to 3D layers. So unless you turn this on, you will not be able to use any of these 3. So first we have the orbit around cursor tool. As the name says, I get to orbit around my cursor. You can see I'm like turning my shapes around and it's orbiting at any direction that I move my cursor. So this is a 3D effect. You cannot do this with a 2D layer. Control Z. Then you can see we have this tiny triangle down below. So this means we have more options. So if I hold down Shift 1, you can see I get this guy. We do that again. And this is the orbit around scene tool, which is not going to be of any use to us because we don't have a scene. We're going to get into these tools later. So next is the pan under cursor tool. So this will go up and down instead of a orbit motion. See, I'm going up, going down. If this was a 3D layer, we could see the distance between each of these elements. So I can move my thing around, my layers. And because I've selected them all, that's why it's like this. But you can see I'm just moving it up and down or any other direction I want. Again, we have a tiny triangle next to this guy, so hold down Shift 2 or I think it's still Shift in Mac. And again, this guy is not something we could use. Pan camera POI tool. We don't have a camera layer at the moment. We'll learn more about that later. But that's like the second option. And then we have the dolly towards cursor tool. This is basically kind of zooming in on wherever you click and go up or down. So it will zoom around that point. It's another 3D thing. Then we have that option. Let's see what it is. Shift 3. So Shift 3. And we have dolly to cursor tool away from cursor point. Not usable here. Let go and you're back to the regular dolly tool. So that's the 3D layers. When you're first starting out and you're working with 2D layers, you won't really be using these tools, but it's good to know what they're for so that it's less confusing if you ever wondered what they are. Let's turn these Rubik's cubes off to get back our 2D layer. Next to that, we have this rotation thing. Just click on that. This basically rotates your composition. So you can see if I go on this layer, layer 2, I can easily rotate the house. But you can see it's rotating along the middle point. This is called the anchor point. So wherever this is, any sort of animation will be done around this guy. We'll talk about anchor points in a minute, but you can see I'm just turning this layer. You can do it with any other layer. And you can see all the anchor points are in the center. If I grab all of these guys, I can turn them all at the same time. Hit Control or Command Z to undo the rotation. So that's the rotation tool. And the shortcut for that is W. So just hit W on your keyboard and you'll be able to rotate either a singular shape, a singular layer, or all of them at the same time. All right, next to that is the anchor tool. We talked about anchor points right now. If you go on it, and let me choose layer 4, zoom in, you can see that the anchor point is in the center. So that means whatever animation I add to this, it's going to be done around this point. What if I wanted to be moving around a point here? Well, I would get the anchor point, which is Y on your keyboard. Click and drag that guy, let's say in the corner. And now if I grab my rotation tool, try to rotate this, you can see it's rotating along that point. Unlike the first time where it was in the middle. Let me undo the anchor point and you can see this was before. Then after that we moved it here and it was rotating along that point. So with the anchor point, you get to move the anchor point for each of the layers. You can even put it outside of the shape, and this will just make it move around that point. It's a really handy tool, especially if you want to animate each of the layers. It's really important to choose the right area for your anchor point. The next tool, and also you can see there's no tiny triangle, so that's the only tool we have. And the next tool we have is called the shape tool. As the name implies, you create shapes with it. Let me turn off all of these layers by turning off all of the eyeballs. On the shape tool, you get to create shapes. I just made a mask layer. Click away from any of the layers and you get to create shapes with the fill color, with the stroke color, and anything else that you want. Again, like any other layer, I can move this guy around and then maybe rotate it around or even change the anchor point for it. So any layer that you create, be it text, shape, or an imported project layer, you can do this rotation and anchor point change. There's no difference. All right, so with the shape tool, you get to create shapes like we just saw, and you can also create mask for a existing layer. And let's quickly go over mask layers. I'll go on rectangle 1, hit backspace to delete it. On shape 1, layer 1. Bring back a layer. Let me create a solid background so we can see the shape properly. Or I could just choose something more vibrant. If I go on layer 9, which is this pumpkin layer, I will get my selection tool and I can click on it, get the triangle, the rectangle. And while I'm selecting layer 9, I'm going to create a shape. And you can see I'm like cutting out the pumpkin and only allowing the parts within my rectangle to be visible. So this is what a mask layer means. You can see there's mask 1. So the way to tell if you're creating a mask or you're creating a shape is to look at your cursor. So currently I'm on layer 9. You can see next to my cursor, there is this square with a circle in it. This is the symbol for mask. If I click away, not selecting any of the layers, we have a star. This indicates that I'm going to be creating a separate layer for a shape. So let's create a shape here. So you can see we can either go on Tool Creates Mask or Tool Creates Shape. So you can also see there's like a star next to it. That indicates that this layer is a shape. We'll learn more about these in further lessons. Now we can see the tiny triangle next to this shape tool, which is right now the rectangle tool. That means that we have more shape options. Let me delete mask, hit backspace, and then turn off the visibility, and then turn off or delete shape layer 1. So let's see the other options that we have for the shape. While you're selecting the shape layer, hit Q. If you go on it, it says Q. And you can see I went on a rounded rectangle. Let me just draw a rounded rectangle. And then I'll hit Q again. We have a circle. Draw my circle. And I'm doing this within one layer. Q, we have a polygon. Oops, it's really big. We have a polygon. Q, we have a star. Q, we have a rectangle. So we have 5 options for shapes, and we can even do more. And I'm going to talk about that in another lesson. I'm just double clicking on the shapes to just move them around. And you can see we have quite a lot of options for these shapes. And if I go on any of them, I can change the fill color, make it red, add a stroke if I want to. Let's add a weird color. And yeah, so that's the shape tool. You create shapes. Each of these tools are going to get their own lessons, so don't worry if it's still a little confusing or if you have a lot of questions. We're just doing a quick overview as to how these tools work and what they're for. Let's delete this layer. The next tool we have is the pen tool. This is another helpful tool. So like we saw in the shape tool, we can create shapes, choose the fill and the stroke, and all that. We can do the exact same thing with the pen tool, but with less traditional shapes. So I can create some weird shape here, choose the fill and stroke color, and just make shape layers like we see here. And also, like the shape layer, I could make mask of a layer. Let me turn one of the layers on. We did the pumpkin already. Let's get the house. So if I go on my house layer and kind of draw around it and close my shape, I'm going to be making a mask of that house. And look at my cursor, I have the mask icon next to it, and that indicates that I'm going to be making a mask. So if I'm not selecting anything, you can see there's a star next to it. That means I'm going to be making a shape, not a star. I could make a star if I want to. It'll just take some time for me to try to make it good. It's not correct. And yeah, I could make a star, and I've made my shape. Move it around here. Let's delete these 2 layers. That will go on that layer and turn it off. And also on layer 2, I'm going to delete the mask transform. So I just have my regular layer. All right, and then the next tool is the T, which is the text tool. And before I forget, let's see the other options for pen. So the pen tool, the shortcut is G. Hit G on your keyboard. We get the mask feather tool, which we will talk about in another lesson. But basically, when you feather the edges of your mask, you're making the edges softer, so that way it will blend in better with the rest of your video or image or anything else that you're trying to create a mask for. So that's the two options. Let's move on to the text type tool. By default, you can see these two panels popped out because we need them. I'm going to close a line. We have the character panel and a paragraph panel, basically anything related to text. With the text tool, if you just hit anywhere on your composition, you can write on your screen, then you'll have a separate layer. So in here, you would go in the character panel, just go to window if you're not seeing this, window character, and you can just change the other things. We'll talk more about that later. And notice how we still have the anchor point, and we also have the anchor point for the pen tool. I forgot to show that to you guys. Let me click away, make something like this. So even though we're creating non-traditional shapes with the pen tool, we are just, you can see the shape I made right here. It's a weird one. After Effects is still going to outline that shape using a square or a rectangle, and it will just place the anchor point in the center of the outline. So it doesn't matter if you're using the pen tool and you're creating a weird shape, you will still have the anchor point to make an animation with that shape, just like you would do with a regular shape. So in order to get the anchor point for your pen tool, you have to drag it. Just click and drag and get it, and then you can just move the anchor point around. And if I get my rotation, you can see that it's rotating. So I forgot to mention that. Let's go back and delete this shape layer. All right. Back to the text layer, we still have that anchor point. Just drag the thing and you can see it's in the corner. Just drag it to any point that you want, and then your text is going to be moving around that point if you were to rotate it or scale it in or out. So with the text tool, you saw we created a separate layer, and I can also use maybe the pen tool to create mask for this layer. Look at my cursor. I will be creating a mask. If I go around it, you can see we only got the L and the O. If I open this up, we have a mask option. So you can use the shape tool or the pen tool to create mask of a pre-existing layer. You can use the text tool to create anything that's related to text. So it could be one word, one sentence, or a paragraph. You can see we have a paragraph option here. We'll get into these in another lesson. Let me close these panels. We'll not be needing them. And then delete my hello layer. All right, so after that, we have the brush tool. With the brush tool, you're going to be just drawing basically. And if I go on my layer, double click to come in the layer itself, I can use the brush tool to just like draw it around and do some cool things. And with the brush tool, you can create frame by frame animations, or you could use it to maybe add a certain detail to your pre-existing video. We have the brush tool here. And then we have the clone tool, which basically clones a number of pixels of your video, the number of pixels that are in the area that you choose, and you can copy it to cover up maybe a subject or an object that you do not want in your video. So that's the clone tool. Just think of it as like, as the name says, clone stamp. You're going to be taking a stamp and then using that ink to make a clone of that stamp. And the brush tool, like we said, we get to draw on it. You can see I drew this line, and you can do some pretty cool animations with it. Now, before I forget, I'm going to close this layer, then come back to composition Halloween elements. Forgot to mention the other options we have for text. Click on it. These guys are going to come back. So text is Control T. If you hit Control T again, we have the vertical type tool. So if you're working with a language that is written like this, then you will use the vertical type tool. It's going to be like this. Or you just use it with any other language. You can see I used it for English and it worked perfectly well. Let's delete this layer. And that's the only options we have. We have horizontal type tool and vertical type tool. Then we saw what the brush was and declone. The eraser tool, as the name says, it erases anything. You can erase parts of the video and then leave it be, as in let it have the transparent background. Let me just demonstrate that. I'll double click on layer 2, get my eraser tool, maybe erase half of this. If I go back, actually let me close this. So it went away. I can erase parts of my layer or my video. Right now it's on right on. Put it on constant. Go back here, you can see we erased part of this layer. So you can use it for some pretty cool effects. Close that off, delete the effects layer. And then we have the roto brush. Now the roto brush is actually really cool. You can use it to cut out your subject from a video, be it a regular video or if it's a green screen, blue screen. And basically you can cut out your subject or an object, anything you want. And then you place it on top of another video, color grade it to make it look cool. So that's what the roto brush does. The shortcut is Alt W or Option W. We have another option for this. I'm going to hold down Alt and press W. Then we have the Refine Edge tool. This is when you want to take out something that has a refined edge. So that includes hair, maybe some fuzzy sweater, tips of grass, things that are just really detailed and you want to make sure you get each of the pixels out. You will use the Refine Edge tool. Finally, the last tool we have, it's the Puppet Position Pin tool. So if you know puppets, they're connected with the joints and they're going to be moving around their joints. So if you have a video, an image of, let's see if we can try it out here. And delete the effects for my ghost layer. Just go on effects, close this off. Make a solid layer, Control Y, Command Y on Mac, bring it down so we can see the effects. I'm gonna get out of here. Go on layer 4 and just bring this guy in the center. So with the puppet tool, what you will do is that you're going to pin the joints of your puppet. This guy won't really have joints. And then you get to move those parts that you cut out and make an animation out of it. So if I have a human figure, I will use this pin tool to put it on the elbow, on the shoulder, maybe on the knees, on the ankle, basically where the joints are. And then I can move those parts. Like I can move the foot like this, I can move the arm like this, and we're going to learn more about this later. But for this ghost, let's attempt to do something. It's not going to look good because there's no joints here. So I'm creating a point right now, and my puppet gets to move around this point. We'll learn more about this later. So this is for the puppets. If you have any sort of character that has those joints and you want them to move around like a puppet would, you would use this tool. And I'm going to go with Control P. See the other option. We have the puppet starch pin. We'll get into these later too. So these are really cool for animations. We have the puppet bend pin tool. And let me see if we can show it. So yeah, you get to do some weird things with it. You can see it's looking really strange because, well, our puppet doesn't really have a joint for me to move it around with. But I get an error. So we have the bending, and then let's see, we have this puppet advanced pin tool, and then we have the puppet overlap pin tool. And that's all the tools that we have for puppets. This will have its own dedicated lesson. It's a lot to explain right now. So these are the tools of After Effects that are available in your toolbar. And if you're not seeing your toolbar, just go in Window and click on Tools. If this is your scenario, just go in here. So let's review it. The Home button is to go to After Effects Home, maybe open a previously made project, create a new project. The Move tool, or the Selection tool, I keep calling it the Move tool, it's to click and move around your workspace. The Hand tool moves your composition around. The Zoom tool zooms in and out of your composition. These three brushes are related to 3D layers. This guy rotates around the point. This guy goes up and down. This guy zooms in and out. We have the Rotation tool to rotate our layers. The Anchor point to choose a point in which all the transform options happen. So the rotation will happen around that point. We have the Shape tool, which is where you get to create shapes with, I believe, 5 options. So the star, the rectangle, the rounded rectangle, polygon, and circle. You get to either create a shape with those mentioned types or create mask layers. The Pen tool, you get to create untraditional shapes or create mask layers. The Text tool is to create text either vertically or horizontally. The Brush tool allows you to draw on your layers or erase from your layers. And it's good to create maybe frame by frame animations. The Clone tool allows us to remove parts of the videos that we don't want by cloning another part on top of it. The Eraser tool is to erase your either cloning or your brush strokes. And then we have the Roto brush, which is to remove the background of any of your videos or cut out your subject to place it on top of another background. And then we have the Puppet Pin tool, which is working with puppets. You create those joints for them, and the areas that you choose will move around that decided point. So these are the tools of After Effects. Now that we know what each of them are for and we kind of categorize them, we can now move on and see how they work with more detail in the next few lessons. So I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. I will see you guys in the next one.